Hello, my name is Ishmael Luke Thomas, and I have been an educator for 34 years. I have been teaching for 34 years, but in different countries. I have taught in Guyana for 10 years, the Bahamas for 10 years. I have taught in Brazil for a year. I have taught in Colombia for 4 years. I've taught in South Carolina here in the United States for a year, and right now I'm in Virginia, United States. I come here today with so much experience and talking about school choice. It's a topic that's very personal to me. Currently, I work here in Virginia at a school called Phillips Programs. It's located here in Annandale in Fairfax County School District. Phillips, it says here, they cater for children and families in this area, but in a special setting. Phillips is a private, non-profit organization serving students with emotional and behavioral needs and developmental disabilities. I work within the high school division. I teach U.S. history, geometry, and algebra 1. But in everything we do here at Phillips, our philosophy is every child can overcome adversity with the right support. And I am part of that team that provide differentiated support for every child. I'm proud to say that most of the students with autism and ADHD and other forms of disabilities are treated with dignity. They are they, with parent support. We provide a holistic learning environment, an environment where students can strive and become, as much as possible, they're the best they can be. That's all I could say. Yeah. This perspective, this perspective shapes how I view education, really, and school choice and privatization of education. It's really, being in the United States really provides the right environment to discuss today's video. So let's talk about school choice. We can define school choice. School choice means public education funds follow the student. So, in actual fact, if 100 students decide to move, or if the parents of 100 students make a decision that sending their student to a private school would be better off, and the fund for each student is 1,000, that 100,000 goes to different schools. Those different private schools now access that money. So for me, school choice means public education funds, again, follow the student. And that's real here, even though in Guyana, where I am from, that might not necessarily happen, or it doesn't happen at all. Really, funds move to schools or services that meet the students' needs. These options very often include public schools, in the United States: charter schools, private schools, or specialized schools. Here in the United States, the funds does not go. The funds do not go to private schools. They go to specific schools, either public schools or charter schools, which are public but are funded by the government. Um, I need to explain a little bit more on that, for but before I say that, I wanted to explain that the approach to education delivery. There are two approaches to education delivery. Here in the United States, we have uniform state delivery. I'm going to say what that means in a minute. And then the rest of the world have education pluralism. So again, we have uniform state delivery here in the United States. The rest of the world has education pluralism. Now I'm going to explain what that is. So let's define the approaches. Uniform state delivery, that's the United States. The government delivers education mainly through public schools, and the Constitution here says only the government can deliver public education. Only the government delivers public education. Education pluralism, which happens through almost the entire world, says education pluralism, government funds education, but delivery includes public, faith-based, as churches, non-profit, or private schools under accountability. I will explain what under accountability means, but we need to say clearly that, of course, there has to be some pros and some cons, pros and cons of these approaches. So the uniform state delivery. The pros: standardized system and universal access. So the system is standardized, so it's predictable. What you see here is the same thing that you will see in another state, or what you see in Florida is the same thing you will see in California or here in Virginia. The access is universal. On the state delivery, the cons: the outcomes are unequal and there's limited innovation. So let me go back to say the cons are rich communities, because the money comes from taxing the communities that have, or the cities where there's more tax, they have better schools. 6 miles away in another city, that's not the same. Cities with less tax, or states with less tax, does not offer the same form of education or the same quality of education. So while the students might graduate, the rate of graduation may be higher here in Virginia, 15 miles away in the capital, DC, that might not be the same. It depends on how much money the state has, how rich the state is. So even though the way the money is delivered is the same, the results might not be the same. In education pluralism, the pros: more options encourages innovation and maybe competition, because now you have churches, you have non-governmental organization, you have a public school system, you have city schools. So they all have they all have access to the same money. The state provides the money, and the private or non-governmental organization might be the one delivering the education. In England, it's very common to see a lot of Anglican schools delivering that form of education, delivering public education. So, education pluralism cons, though, there's a risk of inequality, and it's harder to regulate. Um, Pluralism, government funds education, but multiple providers deliver it. Faith based means churches like Anglicans and Catholics and Methodists, they have schools, and the funding comes from the state. Non-profit organizations or private schools under state accountability, like here in Virginia and DC, we have magnet schools and we have charter schools. And the state funds it, but they have to provide some form of accountability. Again, even though charter schools are private, this is the only exception with the United States. And they are the only ones that are private but are supervised and run and have to provide accountability to the state. Everywhere else in the world, again, it's different. Pluralism, the different entities provide the education, but they have to provide accountability to the state. Why is it relevant today? School choice remains politically divisive in the United States. It would be nice if all the schools had the same facilities, but some schools have less. There are like 12 schools in my city here in Fairfax, and they're very well funded, but just 5 miles away in Annandale, the story is different. So the funding is not necessarily equal. It depends on the demographic data they have, how rich the people in the neighborhood are. The rich people have better schools. Globally, though, many countries support vouchers and tax credits. Belgium and the Netherlands fund both public and private. I just want to remember at this point, I just want to say that according to Gallego and Hernando in 2011, Chile's nationwide voucher reform increased high school graduation rates by 3.6%. This shows that school choice, when carefully designed, can expand educational opportunities and rise attainment levels, something worth considering for all systems like Guyana, in Colombia, and even here in Fairfax County. Okay. As a cautionary insight, though, Galileo and Hernando in 2011, in their study, they also warn us that while Chilean students stayed in school, the quality of secondary education declined because per pupil funding fell. And this suggests that privatization without deliberate investment may harm long-term outcomes. And here too, in the United States, the delivery is uniform, but the outcome is unequal. Why is choice still controversial here in the United States? Or what? I will come back to that, but I also want to mention in Colombia and the Bahamas, pluralism is normalized. It's the only thing they know. Um, Pluralism, like the rest of the world. Sorry, the debate touches. Um, my position right now. I'm running out of time. School choice can empower parents in underserved regions and underserved communities, but without accountability, it risks draining public school resources. So, for example, um, pluralism, where many, doesn't matter where the school is, education, for example, in Colombia, students does live in rural areas, um, but yet churches have schools and the government has schools and different places like in Bogota, the capital city of Colombia. They also get money and voucher system in Medellin, the same thing. The voucher system was started, but there was one problem. In rural parts of Colombia, where the drug cartels are, the FARC and all of that, they are not recognized by the state, but they're basically run towns, and because of that, the government is not able to negotiate or do official businesses with those. So the money and vouchers that should go to kids and children and families in those towns are inaccessible because the government cannot reach those because of the conflict. In Guyana, also, there's not much pluralism. There is more just similar to the United States. The state runs all the schools. This public education is funded by the government. And in Georgetown, the capital, that's, you could basically say, equal access to education. But when it comes to the far-flung indigenous communities, we lack infrastructure. There's limited access to internet. So there are no banks. So access to has to be cash has to be flown in. Anything there's assigned to schools have to be flown in by an airplane. Now we have some access to internet because of Starlink. Schools are now, we are building over several schools. Student now, but prior to this period, like 4 years ago, man, it was really bad. Like students have to learn notes because some of the exams that come they might ask about some social events, and students don't know about that. And how can they ask the significance, for example, of a religious holiday or a national holiday? How can they describe how it is celebrated when they themselves don't have access to information? So things are changing, but it is still hard. I remember as a child growing up, I didn't see what a car was till I was 8 years old. It was difficult to comprehend what was going on the coastlands of Guyana. So, in short, government finds it very hard to deliver. Maybe equality is, but not equity. Is equity equal access to education? But does the education is the education tailored to to the needs of the student. Um, so just like Guyana, Bahamas is the same. Pluralism. The state funds all education, as well as churches, but we have the same problem again. In Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas, the education is I would say equitable, but the islands that make up the Bahamas, many of them, far away. You have the only access is through many hours of on a ship or a flight. Um, so even though it would be nice to have several schools, options, parents have no options. The pluralism is doesn't exist because the only school on the island is the government school. So yeah, just like Guyana, because of infrastructure, there are no private schools in riverine, far flung, and rural communities. And I'm sure the same is for many other countries. So privatization can spur innovation, but often infrastructure prevents options for parents. And then in the city where there's privatization and options, private schools might prioritize profit and prestige over equity. Okay, so my position: support carefully designed school choice policies that expand opportunities while strengthening public education. As again, I just want to sum up by saying I now teach in Fairfax County here in Virginia. I see one of the best resource systems, yet equity debates continue. Now in Fairfax County, I see one of the best. For my own child, I value public schools, but I recognize private and charter schools may meet specialized needs, especially, for example, where I work, Phillips Annandale. It's private, but it caters for specialized needs. Questions I still have are: how can Guyana overcome infrastructure limits so pluralism reaches rural areas? And then in Colombia, how can the voucher funds be protected from misuse or conflict? And in the Bahamas, how can real choice exist in the other islands, which we call the family islands? In the US, how do we design school choice that lifts underserved students without widening the inequality? School choice can open doors, but unchecked privatization risks can harm public education. The balance is clear: expand options for families while also investing in strong public schools. And that's the end of my presentation.